I want to go ahead and say on behalf of the entire ESIP staff, hello and welcome to the 2023 July Earth Science Information Partners Meeting Highlights webinar. If we haven't met, my name is Megan Carter and I'm ESIP's Community Director. The reason why we're here today for this webinar is to highlight key events of the July meeting from many different perspectives. And we're really excited for you to hear from staff, from session organizers, and from our fabulous ESIP community fellows. We invite you to get involved in one or more of the efforts that you see highlighted here today. And we hope that you're motivated by the end of the webinar to do so. We are recording this webinar and it will be posted to the ESIP YouTube channel after the session concludes. If you have questions or comments at any time, please drop them into the chat. Zoom has this relatively new feature where we can have threaded chats where you can reply to individual comments or questions. So we hope that this will help kind of keep us organized as we're asking questions of different presenters. And we hope that our presenters will keep an eye out in the chat and respond there and share their own questions and comments because of course, we don't want this to be a passive webinar, but one where we're learning and interacting with each other. So next slide, please. ESIP hosts, oh, I think we've jumped a little bit ahead. So if we go back to the second slide. ESIP hosts two large conference-style meetings each year in January and July. And these are opportunities for individuals and organizations to connect and to collaborate. And this is for people who are working across sectors and all across the data lifecycle. These meetings are one of the ways that ESIP helps earth science data professionals to find each other, to work together, and to leverage their collective expertise to make progress on common data challenges and opportunities that they see. And next, the theme driving the meeting this year, actually for both of our January and July meetings, has been opening doors to open science. And we are a community of thinkers and leaders around earth science data, and we're dedicated to making data more discoverable, accessible, actionable for others. We've long tackled challenges in and around open science. So this meeting, which was held in Burlington, Vermont, and online from July 18th through the 21st, was an opportunity to continue and to accelerate these efforts. Now, in the next slide, we see just a few of the many beautiful photos from the meeting. Look at all those lovely faces. So by the numbers, in the next slide, we had 366 total attendees, including 120 first-timers. The meeting featured 4 plenary sessions, including our annual Partner Assembly business meeting, over 40 community-led breakout sessions, many of which you'll hear highlighted today. And these sessions collectively featured over 100 different people who served as either organizers and speakers. So the ESIP meetings are truly a community effort, to say the least. In our next slide, you'll see the tools that we leveraged, or a handful of them anyways. We used Slido, we used Kiko Chat for some of our virtual participation. We leveraged Zoom, Sketch for our online agenda. We used the ESIP Figshare repository as our archive of presentations and other content. And we used Google Suite for things like collaborative notes, documents, and agendas to keep us all in the loop as sessions were happening and with the ability to contribute in real time. Breakout session organizers also took part in session facilitation training, once again led by the fabulous master facilitator, Charlie Haley. This was held ahead of the meeting, and it really helped to support the organizers in planning the best sessions possible, I think. Yet again, this training was really evident in many of the sessions. So we've asked presenters to contribute their presentations, as I alluded to before, to the ESIP Figshare repository. And there's a URL in the bottom right here you can use to access content that has already been deposited there. It's by no means all of the content from the meeting. We're still working on encouraging presenters to put their content there. But you'll especially note there were a lot of posters from the research showcase that you will not see highlighted here today. And these were really, really beautiful and informative. And I strongly encourage you to go check them out. You can also find and access content at the Sketch site. So at the top of the Sketch page, which is this URL in the bottom left, You'll find a link to the YouTube playlist that contains all of the recordings from all of the sessions at the meeting. And you'll see a link to a Google Drive folder. You can drill down inside of that to access session notes documents for particular sessions. There's one per session, so you find the day that session happened on, and then you can find that session folder and notes document. Of course, we'll keep linking content as it becomes available to us, and it is not too late to deposit your presentations in Figshare, so just an extra plug to continue to leverage that if possible. So in the next slide, we see just a quick screenshot of the ESIP YouTube channel playlist with all of the breakout and plenary recordings. You can see there are dozens of recordings here. We're super excited about this, so please go check these out and feel free to share them with others. All right, so for our next component, we will move into some plenary highlights. As I mentioned, we have 4 plenary sessions. We will highlight just 2 of them today. And for the first highlight, I'd like to welcome ESIP President Denise Hills to give that.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you as always for putting this together, because there's always too much to see at an ESIP meeting. And I have not figured out how to be in 2 places at once. So it is always great to see the highlights presented here, so I know what to go back and watch on YouTube. But we opened, as we always do, with a wonderful plenary. Susan Shingeldecker, our executive director, welcomed us, and she started off with an absolutely beautiful land acknowledgement. And moved into talking about how we can no longer, because as you remember, there was flooding in Vermont, and we were worried about the impacts on our travel. And she reminded us that we can no longer use terms such as unprecedented or once in a lifetime for these kinds of events, because they're happening more and more regularly. And it highlights the importance of what we at ESIP do. Ken Casey, our immediate past president of ESIP, then introduced ESIP's new vision, missions, and core value statements. This is something that had been in the works for a couple of years, and these core values really, to me, kind of tie the entire opening plenary together. Those core values, in case you don't remember, are integrity, inclusiveness, collaboration, openness, and curiosity. Those core values help to define our mission and vision, and truly they're the heart of what we do here at ESIP. And then we had an absolutely amazing presentation from Dr. Carrie Jordan, who is the executive director of the Carpentries, who is also celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, as is ESIP. And Carrie, not knowing that we were introducing our new mission, vision, and values, core values, actually dove into the Carpentries core values and compared to what we had listed previously. And this was a really great tie for me. And that's kind of my main point here. It's like our core values drive our work and participation in ESIP. It's why we're here. It's why we do what we do. And it's the same that Carrie brought forth. And she had us reflect on our core values and really kind of dig into this. And she really talked about, by breaking down barriers and building bridges to people that we don't necessarily see in the room or don't necessarily actively engage with, but maybe we should, we can really advance equity and inclusion in science. You know, how do we make it more open? But open is not enough. Open is the start. We also need ethical, actionable, and accessible science. And that's part of what can make it open, but you can have any one of those without the others, and it is not a complete whole. And by focusing on our core values there, that's really how we're going to move forward. One of the things that we also did in this plenary is that we tried something a little bit different. We actually did a lot of polls of the audience, including how we can accelerate open science or things that we need to do. And one of the common things that I read through a lot of those comments, really what we need to think about is the incentive structures that we have, whether they're financial or personal or recognition or whatever. We need to change those incentive structures in order to make science more open, more ethical, more actionable, more accessible, and really of your ego and look at the bigger world. Anyway, I thought it was a really wonderful way to open up our plenary, and I hope that you all enjoyed it too. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back and do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And next I'll introduce ESIP Lab Director Annie Burgess to talk about the lab plenary that she organized.
Thanks, everyone, and great to see all of you here today. So the lab plenary started out with just an overview of what we facilitate within the ESIP lab related to our grants programs and programming in general, and focusing on learning objectives along the road of scientific and technical objectives. And then we dove in with two speakers, Dr. Corinne Farewell, who is the head of technology transfer at the University of Vermont, which was the kind of home institution in Burlington for the July meeting. She talked about technology transfer and really communicating with universities, but I think the message that was really interesting and kept coming up in the questioning was, in terms of opening doors to open science, how does licensing and patenting, when you're talking about technology, are those in conflict with open science, or can they work with open science? And her resounding answer was yes, that I don't see open science and patenting or licensing software or technology in conflict, but they can work together. And really, she said, the key is communication and early collaboration with those at your institution that can help work through those things. And she also touched on the University of Vermont's campus-wide open science initiative. I think it's great that we're in an era of universities having really a campus-wide open science initiative, which I don't think would have happened even just a few years ago. I do have a link to that on this slide. I'd recommend checking it out. And it made me sort of think, I wonder how many campuses across the country right now are working through policies like this with their institutions. Next, we had Scott Reinhardt, who is a graphics editor for the New York Times. Beyond his talk, I think just being beautiful because it was really visual. I think the message that was really key came towards the end of his talk when someone asked a question in Slido that said, we have a room full of people that often have to make figures and communicate science. How can we, and do it? And then they added, and do it poorly. How can we do that better? What can we do? And his message was basically like edit, simplify. That he said, scientists often feel like you want to continue to add to a figure. I have to have this in there. I have, like, this won't tell the story if I don't include this information. And he said, often simplifying the story and getting down to a key point will make the figures that you're putting out more compelling. So if you ever need to be inspired by some graphics work, I would recommend watching that talk on YouTube, or when you skim, if you check out the New York Times graphics section and search for his name, he makes some really beautiful graphics. And just to end, he said, another question from the room was, what can our community do? What can the Earth observation community do to help in terms of telling global stories? And not shockingly, he said, higher resolution and higher temporal and spatial resolution and getting information faster and ease of kind of data access are always great things when you're working on communicating kind of late breaking things. So with that, I'll say, if anyone has any questions about either of those speakers or were inspired and want to be in touch with them, you can reach out directly to me and I can get you in contact. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Annie. So next up, we're going to move into the breakout session highlights, and these will be a series of 2-minute lightning talks. The goal is not so much for you to hear everything that happened in the session, but to have your interest piqued and to let you think a little bit about what you might want to jump in on and participate in the future. Strict time will be kept to keep us moving. So speakers, I hope I don't have to use it, but I have a little timer that will go off after 2 minutes. And if you hear that, that's your cue to finish up. I've asked each presenter, as I mentioned, to provide information on how to learn more and how to get involved in the future. And if you have questions, once again, I encourage participants to leverage the chat to have those conversations. So first up, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Joyner to tell us about the session, A Tour of NASA's Earth Science Open Data Resources.
All right, well, thank you, ESIP leadership, co-presenters, and distinguished guests. I'm Elizabeth Joyner, Community Coordinator for NASA's Earth Science Data Systems, and my pronouns are she and her. During the 2023 summer meeting, I had the pleasure of co-presenting with Jennifer Brennan and Ross Bagwell, both of NASA's ESDIS, and together we provided a tour of NASA's Earth Science Open Data Resources. So what in the world does that mean? We walked users through signing up for Earth Data logins. We also had users go through the process of submitting tickets to the forum so they get the experience of asking questions and browsing through different topics that are posted to the forum. We also modeled getting access to data through commonly used data portals such as NASA Worldview, Giovanni, and Earth Data Search. And the goal was to reduce the pain points for beginning data users. And really, we did think it was beginning data users, but what we found was that more experienced data users were in our sessions than beginning data users. And as we began to collect information about the users in the room, we found that many of the users, regardless of where they fell in terms of experience, did not feel like they had a good grasp of our tools. And so the takeaways were that we need more tutorials and more trainings of both inReach inside of NASA and outside of NASA. And so what we're doing are for next steps are short step-by-step video tutorials for working with our tools. So we're really excited about that. So if you're looking to connect with our resources, please check us out at earthdata.nasa.gov. We also provided a GitHub resource, which I believe is linked there, and my time is up. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a perfect way to kick us off. So next I will pass it to Alejandro Paz, who will tell us about earth science and democracy, the role of earth science information and public comments for environmental regulation.
Hi, thanks. So alongside the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, I led this session at our summer meeting. So in this session, participants learned about the federal process for proposing new environmental regulations and how people submit comments in response to these regulations. So together, we explored how the authors of public comments could maybe better incorporate earth science information in what they write and submit to federal agencies. Specifically, together we read and discussed several comments that were submitted to the EPA in response to the new proposed national ambient air quality standards for particulate matter. So the session participants also kind of provided feedback on something that EDGI has been working on, which is a concept for a research guide for helping people write public comments, especially responding to environmental regulations. So this session really helped EDGI kind of further develop what we're calling our public comment project, which is really just trying to figure out how to get people to use better information when responding and providing input to the federal agencies dealing with environmental issues. So we're really, I think the participants raised a lot of important issues, such as distinguishing how people do research when they're writing these comments, and also how or whether they kind of understand basic facts about proposed regulations. We talked about the need for providing better visualizations and informational resources to go along with the information that is published online when these regulations are proposed. And we even discussed the potential for using machine learning to analyze public comments, which are downloadable online, and figuring things out, such as how people cite information in them, how people are citing earth science data, for example. So overall, I think it was an informative session, and EDGI looks forward to kind of further developing our project and better figuring out how, using earth science information can help people produce better public comments and, just have an overall positive impact in this very important public participatory process. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll hear from Benita KC to tell us about enabling interdisciplinary users to make data actionable.
Hi, I'm Benita Casey. I am user needs lead at NASA GES Disk, which is a data center at Goddard Space Flight Center. So the goal of our session was to share interdisciplinary use cases, and that would help us to identify some of the gaps and help to practice open science, kind of like enhance the collaboration, and definitely that would ultimately help in effective decision making. Our session was really interactive and more like an experience sharing session. So we used Mentimeter to gather feedback on the pain points and potential solutions from the audience, and we actually received a lot of feedback from the audience as well. So I'm putting them as a takeaways. So the major pain points that was mentioned during the session was that our data sets and services are not interoperable, and often when we use produce documentations on data sets or write any science articles, we don't pay attention to the vocabulary, so that is very important. And also like proper documentation, simplifying the documentation is really important as well. And also a lot of audience mentioned about lack of background knowledge, because interdisciplinary users come from different background, and it's important that we provide enough background knowledge to those users. And some of the potential solutions that was discussed and provided by the audience was that there is a need to lower the barrier to access data set, particularly reducing the technical skills needed to access the data set, and provide more like mobile friendly applications, so wider range of users can use the data for different application purpose. And the other solution was to provide more trainings, proper documentation, and also one of the things that I really loved was about providing metadata that intersects across the disciplines. So we received a lot of feedback, and again, it was a great session, very interactive and interdisciplinary. And with that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Benita.
Thanks.
Next, we'll move on to talk with Steve Young about how can large language models and chat tools help communities find, access, and understand and act upon air quality information.
All right, well, thanks, Megan. Thanks for organizing this. So this was more of a workshop style session where we actually interacted in the group with ChatGPT and fed prompts to ChatGPT. So it was good to see great group engagement in this session. We had about 30 people, even though it was the final slot for the meeting. And what we saw was a lot of potential, especially at what I would call the knowledge and information levels. For people who are new to air quality, for example, nomenclature has already come up, people who are hearing PM 2.5, AQI, concepts like that, who really need background information about what are these things. potentially the conversational style is very useful, I think. So think about local community members. Needless to say, time doesn't permit, but there are a lot of limitations. There are a lot of cautionary notes that have to be taken into account. We were not seeing a lot of hallucination, however, so that was slightly encouraging. And I think a reason for that was some preliminary inputs had been fed into the conversation that I think helped build context so that what we got back was better. The pace of change is so dramatic. I mean, literally every day there's new developments in this space. So it's really important to keep an eye on what's happening. And clearly open source. I think many of us are fans of open source. We'd like to explore open source alternatives going forward. You can actually see a lot of information about it if you look at the link that's shown, the bit.ly link. And I am going to wrap there. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Stop my timer. All right, so next up, we'll move on to Zhang Liu, who will tell us about information quality for open science across disciplines.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Hello, everybody. My name is Zhang Liu. On behalf of the co-chairs of the Information Quality Cluster, I would like to present our takeaways. So the objective of our session is to identify information quality challenges for interdisciplinary science solutions and development or expansion opportunities of the partnership for the IQC. So we had 5 invited presentations covering several important areas, such as activities from the European Open Science Cloud Data Quality Working Group and multi-satellite aerosol product suite, and also interdisciplinary user needs. And so in a packed room, roughly 85 attendees registered. So the takeaways include discovery needs from users, product developers, and data service providers, as illustrated in the figure on the right. And also continue to understand and incorporate the FAIR guiding principle and the open science in information quality, in particular for the interdisciplinary science. We need to expand community efforts. Participation from all related parties is very important. So we need to expand this a strong partnership among domestic and especially international organizations. So the path forward is continue to develop and expand a global community partnership to identify needs, challenges, and solutions for the IQC. So if you want to learn more about us, so please check our IQC wiki page. And also, if you want to join IQC, the link is here as well. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pause for a second. I don't see a lot of chatter in the chat, but don't forget that's where you can leave questions or comments, even just comments for our presenters. I know we're bombarding you with a number of different topics in quick succession, but don't forget that is an option. So let's go ahead and move on to discussing the session, informing decisions around climate risk, global and local applications using NASA Earth data systems.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Mukul Sanwalkar. I'm at NASA Goddard and SSAI. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Megan and ESIP. So our session, the overarching theme was how best to partner with data intermediaries to co-produce solutions for non-traditional stakeholders. So we started our session with introduction about all the presenters, and that was done by Stephanie Schaller-Toos, who's the Applied Sciences Manager at NASA Goddard, and Robert Gredick from Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center and University of Pittsburgh started us out with emphasis on how stakeholders and what their needs are from the point of view of data intermediaries. And it comes down to really having for us to seek out such data intermediaries who have a preset network of people on ground to be able to apply high level products, NASA products, to their community level concerns. Now, in this case, their priorities were air quality, flood risk, landslide, heat islands, amongst many, which have quite a bit of overlap with NASA product offerings. We then presented next, Stephanie and I, and our uh, principle is basically how do we have open science uh, be presented to stakeholders in co-producing solutions with them so that they can take these solutions and make informed decisions on ground themselves. And some of the challenges we face, of course, would be open science infrastructure. How do you define that? uh, the data processing at scale, downscaling model data, model output data to a local scale, and what is analysis ready product for stakeholder usage. Mitch, after that, from IBM Tokyo, visiting us all the way from there as part of this session, talked about foundation models. Foundation models are basically changing the paradigm of machine learning usage beyond natural language processing. And as we know, machine learning algorithms sometimes fall short, sometimes due to lack of labeled data sets, or creating or labeling training data could be expensive at times. But IBM NASA have been working together. They've teamed up to apply foundation model AI technology for earth science data. They had a workshop where participants conducted several use cases and participated in a collaborative environment on science managed cloud environment. They're still, they're they're continuously working with this model development group, as I understand. Use cases for them at this point, they range from flood mapping to fire scar mapping. And all of these were done in a big data cloud infrastructure. Towards the end, we had Grace Levlin from NASA JPL. She shared, some demos. She shared details and talked around ESDT, their Earth System Digital Twin platform. This is an integrated, multi-domain, interactive, multi-scale, basically digitally replicating the state and temporal evolution of Earth systems. So they're collaborating with NASA ESTO, AIST, and their project called IDEAS, Integrate Digital Earth Analysis System, provides a professional-grade open source Earth System Digital Twins framework. It allows for access, integration, and understanding of disparate data sets, streamlined data assimilation for model and analysis, and allows for dynamic integration of new observations, and also for interoperable machine learning models and data services. So she shared with us examples of immersive flood prediction and analysis toolkit using VR technology that was pretty well received. She also shared applications in wildfire air quality and health impact, which is more scenario-based analysis, and that would allow for predictions and also alarms within that could be triggered within this framework. And some of the challenges, of course, with digital twins is, how capturing the multitude of how best to capture the multitude of physical characteristics and Earth observational data sets within a single digital twin framework. Then perhaps she'd recommend digital twin islands, which could be several of them, and these are bound by bridges of interoperable open source and reusable framework. So we concluded the presentations with a summary by Jennifer Wei, who's the NASA Justice Manager, and she talked and identified the challenges, but also the opportunities that we can work together to solve the identified problems. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that highlight. Next, we'll hear from Leslie Shee, who will tell us about data strategies, sharing challenges, plans, and priorities across federal agencies.
Thanks, Megan. So I hosted a session with Megan Carter that used ESIP as a place for strategic discussion. The goal of our session was to increase awareness of different agency data strategies, challenges, implementation plans, and points of contact. A poll that we did at the beginning of the session showed that most people in the room thought they would be affected in some way by the recent federal data strategies. During the session, we went over the basics of the overall US federal data strategy, the two Office of Science and Technology policy memos, known as the Holdren and Nelson memos, public access plans from different agencies, and other agency-specific data strategies. Our speakers were from USGS, US Department of Agriculture, EPA, NASA, and NOAA. And we learned that agencies are putting a lot of effort into making their data available and aligned with current policy, but are also facing similar challenges in implementing these new policies. Speakers were encouraged to come with questions for each other, and we found many opportunities to make connections and learn from each other. We know there are more groups to hear from, so we plan to expand and continue this discussion in the fall and at the January ESIP meeting. If you're interested in learning more or getting involved, contact me by email or on Slack, or let me know in the chat. We are lucky that ESIP is an established and unique place for cross-agency discussions like this one. ESIP has a mix of strategizers and implementers that can share and leverage solutions for making our data as open and useful as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. Next, we'll hear from Becky Reed to tell us about the ESIP teacher workshop from this summer.
Okay, thanks, Megan. This was our 15th annual event, or 15th annual teacher workshop, and we were supported by NOAA. We were happy to have 4 ESIP founding members present for the ESIP teacher workshop: Pat Reif, Tamara Ledley, Bob Downs, and Dave Jones. And the agenda included NASA, NOAA, and USGS content. And we had 2 Funding Friday awards from teachers. We had 2 days of the workshop, and the first one was what we call Eclipse Day. We're focusing on the upcoming 2 eclipses. So Pat Reif took us through upcoming eclipses and how to understand them and present them in the classrooms. Teachers got eclipse kits with posters and eclipse glasses for all their students. Tamara Ledley took us through eclipses around the world, giving us highlights of her eclipse chasing experiences. And then Pat took us outside for eclipse safe viewing activities for all ages, including little kids. And I wrapped up that day with an intro to ESIP member Nereid, which is the Network for Earth Space Research, Education, and Innovative with Data. And then Thursday, our second day, was ESIP Variety Day. We had Vicki Gorman and Margaret Mooney showed us how to use NOAA satellite data in virtual science fairs. Then Stacy Ballou and Annette Brickley shared Northeast Ecosystems Data Jams, where we saw examples of students creating kit songs and media presentations that explained the meaning of ecosystem data. And then we had a group of ESIP members sharing their computer and phone apps for use in classroom settings. Tamara Ledley was back with her very popular En-ROADS Climate Interactive program. Dave Jones spontaneously jumped in to join us to present Delivering Heliophysics Big Year to students and the public. Talked about connecting with local media outlets. Bob Downs has another popular presentation with the NASA CDAC Viewer app. And then Pete Steves from USGS joined us to present his Stream Stats app. And I finished that day with taking it back to the classroom discussion to make sure teachers could bring that back to their students. We had a Funding Friday poster making session. And as you know, we got 2 teachers got Funding Friday awards. We appreciate that. Our only negative was a relatively low attendance. We had many interested, but really only 7 attended. We're going to attribute that low attendance to 2 things. One was the stipend is $300 to attend, and that's been that way for 15 years. And also the general burnout related to the pandemic. We think probably the stipend wasn't enough and teachers are tired. Except for the ones that showed up to our program. But despite the low attendance, we think it was an excellent workshop. And I'd like to give a shout out to Margaret Mooney, who's been running the ESIP teacher workshop since the beginning and has served as our education chair this last year and is threatening to retire, if you can believe it. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Becky. So the teacher workshop, whether or not you've joined it in the past, is always an extremely important part of our ESIP meetings in the summer. And I think Becky gave a nice sense of how there are more ESIP partners and individuals who have things to offer teachers than maybe they realize, whether or not they were designed for that purpose. And so I would love over the coming year, to explore, maybe there's something you don't realize that could actually have great value for future teacher workshops. So just file that away for now. But thank you, Becky. So moving on, we will talk about another important education topic. We'll talk with Steve Formel about planting the seeds for a strong data management future, incorporating data management into college curricula.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay? My camera's not working. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So thank you, Megan. And I am very happy to be following Becky in that workshop and all the amazing work they do. We're thinking about sort of the next part of it, which is thinking about a future where data training after college is an anomaly instead of a necessity. This was a session I co-organized with Abby Benson from USGS and Stace Beaulieu from Hui, and also Steve Diggs from the University of California. And in our collective experience, we had discussed how it's sort of the exception, the college graduate as a scientist who comes out being well-versed in data management. And so this session really started, I think, at an unconference last year in Pittsburgh that Abby and Steve helped run. And so we put this together this year, really just trying to get people in the room to talk about this subject and see if others felt like we did. And the answer was yes, that people definitely did. There was really strong enthusiasm and I think general agreement that there was a big need. We had a few dozen people in the room to the point where people were bringing in extra chairs, which was really exciting. We weren't really sure if we weren't expecting that necessarily. What we did was we first presented 4 provocations to folks. So we had Wade Bishop from University of Tennessee, Mike Gravina from Ohio State University, and then Stace and Steve Diggs also gave some summaries of their experiences as educators and some ideas about actions of how we could improve this improve this problem in the future. So we had people work in breakouts and then tried to collate those via Slido into sort of action points that could be synthesized into further conversation. One of the big takeaways, I would say, across the action points is that this requires partnership with educators and institutions. So, we can do things as individuals, but we also need to make changes at high levels, tackle things like accreditation of these classes. And also it's a two-way street. It's not enough to ask people to come to us. We also need to go to education conferences and teaching conferences and put ourselves into their world. Another thing that was really emphasized is, the resources need to be open and well publicized so that it's very easy for people to use them and to incorporate them into their classes and their curricula. And then finally, people were curious, where are we going to go with this next? And right now what we have planned is we're putting together a presentation for ocean sciences to sort of continue that conversation and see how it evolves a little further with that crowd. And then we're also putting together a proposal for an EOS article so that we have a place to sort of anchor this idea with a citation that can be referenced if you wanted to bring the idea to, an administration or a funder, for example. So I put my contact on here, but I know Abby and Stace and Steve would also be happy to field any questions. Feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to get involved. We're really excited about where this is going.
Thank you, Steve. I really love the concrete next actions that you've listed. So now we will pivot to the Cloud Computing Cluster Chair, Amy B, to tell us about not 1 or 2, but 3 cloud sessions that she organized at the July meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So I'm gonna go a little bit off script here because I wanted to actually remind people what what the sessions were as well before giving. So I sort of spammed the chat a little bit. Sorry about that. So we had 3 cloud sessions, which I just posted in the chat. So we had this new format where we did lightning talks, and those lightning talks led to breakout groups. So there you can see in the list in the chat that there is a number of different topics, which I sort of categorized as cloud native standards, cloud computing environments, technologies for cloud computing environments, and then cloud computing use cases. So we had people do lightning talks, and then depending on what the audience's interest level were, or specific interests were, they would like navigate to breakout groups. So this was inspired by like AGU and EGU poster sessions, or e-lightning talks, I guess they call them. And I really like that way for people to like dig deep into a specific topic of interest and have more like intimate connection about it. Then we had our tutorials, which were on Kerchunk and Geospatial Python. So that was another session the same day. And then finally on Thursday, we had a open work session. So my takeaways from this were less necessarily like concrete, like, oh, there's a new standard, but more that these new formats for collaboration were really successful. So the lightning talks to breakout sessions, tutorials, and the open work session all seemed to be pretty popular. And so I would really like to extend the open work session to be a full day or a half day. Sorry, that should say a full half day or a full day, if that's clear. So it was nice to have it near the end of the week to take advantage of ideas generated earlier in the week. And there was a lot of collaboration within the room, so it was awesome. And that's what that picture is from, is actually from the Cloud Native GeoJam, what is what we called it. But I also should have enforced takeaways being collected from the breakout sessions. So especially when we had those lightning talks to breakout sessions, it would have been good if I'd been a little bit more strategic and regimented about getting takeaways from people. And then just, in general about the content itself, there's still a lot of questions about what is cloud native geospatial. So I think we should continue to do what we're doing in terms of having webinars and discussions to keep people abreast of like the newest developments. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Amy. And Amy's an excellent person to follow up with because of the fast-paced nature and the multiple overlapping demos that happened in some of those sessions, those recordings. You don't have access to everything that happened in the room, but Amy's a great place to follow up if there's anything in the list here that's not in the recording that you'd like to know more about. All right, so next we'll move to Nathan McEachin, who will talk about facilitating knowledge sharing through spatial knowledge graph interoperability and dependency management.
Hello, everyone. So I presented on an architecture pattern we're developing to automate knowledge sharing to help lower resource settings meet the Sustainable Development Goals. So quick background, this approach was initially funded from the disease intervention and elimination space to help facilitate a single source of truth for geographic data by those with the respective authoritative mandate. The concept is kind of like a code repository, but rather than managing dependencies between code, the idea is that we are managing dependencies between interlinked spatial knowledge graphs developed by different organizations. So we do have an initial implementation. It is entirely open source. Initial deployments are for the National Geospatial Agency of Mozambique to help meet their NSDI mandate. We've also implemented it for a use case for the U.S. Forest Service and GeoPlatform to support UAV data management. So GeoPlatform is responsible for making data fair for U.S. agencies according to the Geospatial Data Act of 2018. We are recently expanding to implement a use case for the U.S. Department of Interior. So we got some great feedback from the attendees. There was consensus that knowledge sharing needs to be done at scale to meet social impact objectives. Also, some very valuable feedback was that our approach seems to be geared towards supporting spatial data infrastructures. Specifically, it seems promising for facilitating knowledge sharing between earth science efforts by making what is called horizontal spatial knowledge graphs more interoperable. A horizontal knowledge graph or an ontology is something that cross-cuts multiple domains. So in conclusion, to the earth science community, many domains such as public health can benefit greatly from your work. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with members of the ESIP community to help facilitate knowledge interoperability.
Thank you, Nathan. Now we'll hear from Carolina Barris-Gonzalez about ESIP in the Ocean Decade, efforts and opportunities to engage.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Hi, I'm Carolina Barris-Gonzalez. I'm one of the chairs of the Marine Data Cluster, along with Matthew Biddle, and recently joined Joseph Pham. Our session was about the UN Ocean Decade, and we had 3 presentations followed by a discussion. The presentation started with Steve Diggs, who gave us an overview of the Ocean Decade. And he explained that the Ocean Decade is actually not really a single body, but a collection of advising bodies and activities that are referred to as actions that are recognized by the Ocean Decade as contributing to its goals. So the nice takeaway here is that those contributing can really shape what the Ocean Decade looks like and accomplishes. And the next presentation was by Frank Muller-Karger, who spoke about Marine Life 2030, which is an Ocean Decade program aimed at addressing biodiversity in the ocean. The third presentation was from Kate Rose, who's here today too, if anyone has any questions for her. And she presented her work with the CMEX vocabulary update and the still ongoing process of applying to be endorsed as a project under the Marine Life 2030 program. So the presentations were followed by a discussion around how the ESIP community might be uniquely positioned to contribute to the Ocean Decade's goals. And then we also had a follow-on unconference session where we decided that the Marine Data Cluster would start to compile a list of current efforts connected to the Ocean Decade being done by people within the ESIP community and resources for connecting. So if you are involved in the Ocean Decade or are interested in more information, please do get in touch. Our contacts are on the ESIP wiki on our page. And there will also be more follow-up activities, including a collaboration with the Semantic Harmonization Cluster at our next monthly call, which is on the ESIP community calendar, and more collaborations across ESIP are in the works. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Carolina. That was very nice. So next we'll talk with Dave Jones about 2 different sessions that he was involved in organizing, one related to the wildfires cluster and also the disasters cluster. So Dave, take it away.
Oh, thanks, Megan. Hi, everybody. We had a great session talking about the wildfires in the wildfire cluster. Certainly not fun to talk about all the wildfires that have been happening around the country and around the world. But our session focused on identifying key challenges to proactive wildfire management that require data synergies between agencies. There's a lot of individual activities going on within agencies. A lot of them seem disconnected. I know they're probably very connected if you're fighting a wildfire and you're accessing data and using it. But there was certainly great interest in the cluster meeting in trusted wildfire data sources. What kind of sources are out there? We know that it's also kind of difficult to find wildfire data. And also, it seems like some federal sources are less open than they were this time last year. So we'd like to dive into that a little bit as well. We want to make sure that we keep data sources open and accessible. We know that NASA is really promoting the open science approach, and so is ESIP, but that really needs to catch on into some other agencies, which will certainly help to do. We want to identify key data sources as well. There's so many apps out there, websites, portals, and things like that, that it's very difficult to know what data you're accessing and what data you're using. And then we also want to provide feedback to those data producers to provide them with information that they can make their data more follow the FAIR principles, findable, addressable, interoperable, and all that stuff. So please, if you're interested in joining the ESIP Wildfire Cluster, we started in the January meeting. So we're just now 7 months into the Wildfire Cluster. Please scan with your phone that QR code that's displayed, and you can sign up to join the email list. and that's where we communicate a lot of information about our meetings. And also we have the Slack channel as well, just hashtag wildfires. So please join us. We have a lot to talk about. There's so many things happening in the wildfire space. A lot of it is tragic, but we really want to make that data more accessible to people who can better make decisions and better plan. So that's it for the wildfire talk. My next briefing was on the disasters. For the disaster cluster. If we could have the next slide on that one, please. There we go. So in the disaster lifecycle cluster, we are now taking a look at what are some key use cases or needs that we could dive into to just kind of dig around and talk about what's going on in the disaster lifecycle space for data. We know that data users are all around us. We also know that they're having trouble knowing what's out there. It's just incredible how many times I personally talk to users who want more information from federal agencies, and when I show them what's available, they're floored. They never knew it. So it's really interesting to understand why. And of course, we were meeting in Burlington, Vermont, which was being hit by some historic rainfall and flooding. Some areas getting more rainfall than they did in Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Irene in 2011, which was pretty amazing. And we also found actually on my flight up to Burlington, I sat next to a volunteer responder who was going up to look at survey damage in some of the towns so he could bring up a bunch of equipment to help those towns. And one of the biggest thing he said was there's a big lack of coordination between volunteer disaster responders where they're stepping on each other's toes more and more frequently, and they need some way to coordinate that capability. And I heard that again in the ESIP meeting. And so there's also a lack of data collection coordination. So this particular slide brings up a key need from Phil Balin, who participates in our cluster, and he's with the California National Guard and also FEMA. And he's saying basically we have no way of seeing what data is available or being collected in disaster areas. We have to open doors to open science and not force people to be in the know on where to get data. And that means just saying, oh, hey, try this link, try this link. Yeah, I know you. We need to find out what data is being collected so we can make that available much more quickly. And so we're looking at pulling on that thread a little bit more. And we also talked a little bit about ESIP and how it could contribute to educating Congress. Whenever Congress has hearings on data sharing, observation platforms, ESIP has such a breadth of expertise and knowledge where maybe we could pull on some of our members to further educate some of the members of Congress, because some of the hearings seem to be a little bit misguided at times. So that's it. And please scan this code if you want to join the mailing list for the ESIP Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. We meet on the first Thursday of every month from 4 to 5 Eastern Time. So that's it for me. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you, Dave. So next, we'll hear from Joseph Bell about the EnviroSensing cluster session on wireless environmental monitoring community of practice.
Hi, Megan, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so just kind of quickly, this was a really laid back session. We had really a small core group, and we talked about some basic things like, what the heck is wireless, and then how do we integrate stuff from the past to the what we have today. And then we dug into like the differences between LoRaWAN and LoRa and these protocols, right? The original intent for the session was to be a build session, but we turned it into kind of a demo question and answer, right? And some of the key takeaways James Gallagher said, right? This stuff isn't that hard because it has a familiar workflow, right? So we were able to take some folks that had never touched some things before with the help of Mike Daniels and John Porter, Steve Young, James Gallagher, right? we had some neat little toys in the room that we were able to play with and get connectivity to the web. So it was a really cool demonstration of how we can take these little sensors that you can get for relatively low cost and connect them and get good observations. Right, by the end of the session, we were monitoring the environment of our session room with temperature and the such. So it was really neat, and the cool thing about it was it had the feeling of kind of starting momentum in a direction. So the cluster is exploring with Daniel Fuca and Scotty Strachan, Martha Apple, the idea of integrating a build session into our monthly calls. So we have all these kits, the chips on the side you can see, and then so the idea is to get these chips maybe distributed to users in our cluster and have them build it. So we'll see how that goes. It's a bit of a hands-on / remote interoperability thing, so it sounds pretty fun. And then right, so then just to end, right, sometimes the Internet of Things, right, these things can be intimidating. Reach out to the EnviroSensing cluster. We love to answer questions. We do need to do a better job on Slack. But yeah, come join us first Tuesday of the month, and we talk about all things sensing. Thanks for the chance, Megan.
Thank you, Joseph. And I will say every cluster has a different feel, different focus, different format, different things they're passionate about. And it's always fun to see how much fun this group has together, getting down in the weeds in some of these challenges. So encouragement to check them out. All right, so last but not least of the session highlights, we are going to turn to Leslie Wyborn, who has woken up very early in Australia because she is just so passionate about talking to us today about reducing friction between repositories and publishers and making research data open and fair.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is kind of a group that's, I don't like to use the word struggling. It's actually the Coalition of Publishers and Data in the Earth and Space Sciences, which is a collaboration amongst repositories, funders, data users, researchers that are focused on implementing leading practices around the presentation and citation of data and software and samples. That is trying to bridge that gap between what the repositories are storing, what the publishers want, and the researchers are kind of in the middle, trying to figure out, because there's often conflict between the repositories and the publishers. And certainly, as you know, researchers do listen to publishers. So we've been having meetings for several years now, but I'd just like to say the number and energy of people attending this session was just the best we've ever had. I think we had 75 people online and in person, and there is a need for Coptus, but how do we become more active? We noted that Danny Kincaid, who's been working with us in ESIP for several years, is now trying to get a working group started in RDA, which is on coordinating between that triangle of the repository, the researcher, and the publisher. But there's no way for repositories and publishers to effectively communicate within ESIP. We'd like to say that the attendance at this session, we put more towards the CDF group joining ESIP, and you had more repository sessions. So we have got a way of collecting what the repositories are having with the publishers, which makes, you know, a much bigger voice than just the one or two of us that have been doing it up till now. But then the issue is, how do we engage with the publishers? And that's something we used to do more at meetings like AGU and EGU, because that's where they are. So we're saying this is a necessary group, but we would welcome any ideas on how to move forward, because it's kind of getting critical that we're just not getting that connection with the not being able to get the three groups together in the one room. So any ideas would be more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. So next up, we're going to move to 3 more quick report outs. And this is one of my favorite parts of these webinars, because we get to see the meeting through the eyes of our ESIP community fellows, really unique perspectives. And so we'd love to just hear their impressions. And I would like to welcome first Morgan to start us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Wofford. As Megan said, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan School of Information, and I'm a community fellow for the Open Science Cluster this year. And I was a community fellow last year for community resilience. The July meeting was my first in-person ESIP meeting, and it was such a valuable experience, especially coming from an information science department. The interdisciplinarity of the meeting was especially useful, just learning how other people are addressing common data science problems across disciplines. So I thought I'd kind of talk about two experiences. So the first was the unconference session on implementing the CARE principles for Indigenous data governance in earth science metadata. It was especially valuable and great to share insights about projects that are implementing CARE or trying to implement CARE for paleoecological data and genetic biodiversity data. And then just more broadly, having discussions with people about knowledge graphs, a topic that interests the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research at the University of Michigan, where I also work. So as a part of our own data discovery efforts, we are exploring knowledge graphs. And so just seeing and talking about the initiatives undertaken by other organizations at ESIP and potentially identifying contacts was super beneficial. So I had a lovely time, and I want to thank everyone for welcoming me.
Thank you, Morgan. And next we'll hear from Kyla Richards. And you'll want to unmute first, Kyla.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyla, and I'm a community fellow in the Biological Data Standards Cluster. And I'm going to share my experience at the ESIP conference from the perspective of an early career scientist. The ESIP July meeting was the first in-person meeting that I've ever attended, and I found this to be very valuable for several reasons. By meeting people face-to-face and engaging in meaningful conversations, I was able to expand my network and understand how data science plays into different earth science fields. As an early career scientist, when I first entered the job search, it was hard to understand just how many different career paths in data science there are. And at the ESIP meeting, I was able to converse with professionals who worked at different agencies and contracting companies to learn about their day-to-day work and projects. Their insights shared and challenges discussed provided me with more of an understanding of what type of work I'd like to pursue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyla. And last but not least, Chad.
Hey everyone, I'm Chad Leichto, first-year community fellow and recent information sciences graduate. This is my first jump into a new career after leaving the military after 23 years. So it's been an awesome journey so far. Big takeaways were the reducing Leslie Wyborn's reducing friction between repositories. Session was absolutely amazing, high energy. I come from a career background where solutions are not just requested, they are expected, and hearing a room full of people, we have ways to solve these problems, including Leslie herself. If you give me 5 minutes, let me get to the slide, I'll answer all of your questions, and here's the solutions. Pretty remarkable. I've really enjoyed getting to know my fellow fellows, meeting them in person. They're just extraordinary people, their research, their interests, their personalities. Absolutely shining examples of future leaders and academics, professors. I can't wait to see what they do next. And one of my big goals, people would ask me what I want to do with myself after I retire from the military. It was a big question that we all ask. I said I want to surround myself with big brain energy, and the ESIP community is big brain energy. It's humbling to be around people that are so motivated, so intelligent, so much going on, and also it's amazing to be a part of this community. And it's something I'd like to continue on with Dave Jones and the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. Continue on wherever I can help out and offer a set of hands. So thanks very much.
Chad, and to all the fellows for sharing their enthusiasm. We look forward to working with you throughout the rest of this year. And just a quick plug that we are now Recruiting for our next round of ESIP Community Fellows will start in December. So if you see the call, please feel free to share it. We are always very fortunate to have such wonderful fellows, but we need help in getting the word out. All right, so thank you, everyone. This was a tremendous collaboration amongst many, many people. We encourage you to keep adding things to the chat, reach out to each other after the webinar. And I'd like to pass it to Allison Mills, ESIP's Communications Director, who's also been driving the slides in the background to help us close the webinar out.
All right, hey everyone. So I get the joy of reminding you all that we've had a really big anniversary to celebrate this year, and it was our 25 years of ESIP. So if you haven't seen it yet, if you go to the YouTube channel where you can check out all of the recordings from the breakout sessions and our plenaries, there is another special video in there. We recorded a short Vox Pop, which is like a voice of the people kind of audio story. And it is like highlighting like what people love about ESIP. Everyone literally answers the question, ESIP is a place to, and then they fill in the blank. And then we kind of dive into our values, our new mission statement, and then envision where ESIP is going to be for the next 25 years. And so it's very uplifting. It's really exciting. It takes all of the enthusiasm that we shared today and condenses it down into 2 minutes. So I highly recommend that video. We'll make sure to share the link and share it out with everyone. And then if you want to continue being inspired by ESIP and continue connecting, there are a handful of ways you can do that. The big one is to make sure that you're joining in on some of the monthly calls. We've got 30 plus collaboration areas. So if you go to the ESIP community calendar, that will show you which ones are meeting when. You can also keep an eye out for several applications that will be rolling out, including our Community Fellows program. We will have our awards rolling out this fall. And then the one that Annie and I get really excited about is the small grant funding that we do through the ESIP lab. And so we will be sharing out this year's projects, which are all dedicated to wildfire and water resource science. And then we'll be sharing out the next RFP early next year. We try to get that out before the ESIP meeting. And then last but not least, if you want to like just kind of like keep a pulse on everything that's happening in ESIP, obviously this is a very vibrant community. So if you kind of want to just see what's going on and keep a sense of all of that and keep it straight, the easiest way to do that is to get the weekly newsletter, and you can sign up via the QR code or just go to esipfed.org/subscribe. And we include some of the ESIP things that are happening, but we also include job updates, events and webinars from other groups, articles and readings. And so I also am very excited to help you share your work, share your organization's events and things like that too. So feel free to send me any of that info. It's just AllisonMills@esipfed.org. And I think that's it. Anything else, Megan?
Nope, just thank you to everyone. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you all. And feel free to share this webinar once it's available on the ESIP YouTube channel.